Sing Yuan, let's start by hearing your story. Why did you join tax as a profession?
After my A-levels, it's like everyone would be going around looking for temporary jobs. So I found one with the IRAS back then. So back then, I think it was the days of the paper filings. So actually, they employed many temp staffs to help prepare the tax returns, the paper ones that comes in, so that it would be ready to be passed through the system for processing. So I I did that job. So when I was there, I kind of got to know the people in IRAS, the culture, and to do that job, you also need to know a bit about tax. And I found that I quite enjoyed doing that. I did enjoy the culture as well and the people, and I thought IRAS would be quite a nice place to work in. So after getting my results, then I applied for a scholarship, and from then on, it's just with IRAS.
Tax is not a traditional area that people find very exciting. From what you're saying, that's not true, that it is a very challenging area. Why do you think that is so?
Well, I guess for tax, most people would associate it with the things that they're most familiar with, such as for individual
tax
income
filing dates.
Tax filing, that's right. But I guess tax is a bit more than that, because it's like when you look at, perhaps for individuals who have very complicated matters, for example, if you own properties, or if you do business, or for the businesses actually, tax plays an important role, and in terms of consideration for the kind of things that they would do, how they would go about doing certain things, and all that. And moreover, it's a very dynamic world that we live in. So the kind of business structures, transactions, business models that people use are very different. And it's like you have to keep on following the trends and to ensure that your tax rules can still be applied and you can still get an outcome that you're trying to achieve through the tax rules.
What do people get in a tax career? Where can they go if they start somewhere? Where would they start and where can they go?
For a tax career, if you are talking about it, say for someone fresh out of either the polytechnics or the universities in our local context, you would typically be able to go into any of the accounting firms, for instance, to start off as a tax junior. Well, IRAS is also another possibility whereby you can go in as a fresh graduate, and in all these areas there would be training provided to bring you through. In tax, you also have indirect tax as well, property tax as well. So there are many different areas, and of course, the more experience you have, then the further up the chain you can go and the more complicated the transactions that you will get.
What sort of experience are going to help people succeed in having a tax career, do you think?
People might feel that tax is very boring because it's about maybe perhaps the Income Tax Act, the law and everything, rule by rule, but actually it's a bit more than that. The rules might be there, but the rules can also be changed. And it's the rules are to be applied to the environment and to businesses, and that's constantly changing. So which is why it's very important to constantly stay updated and relevant. So I think that's the most exciting part of a tax career.
Given that it is an area that's undergoing a lot of change. We've got, of course, base erosion, profit shifting, BEPS. You've got a lot of things happening on the transfer pricing side as a result. But going forward, these are going to create opportunities and many challenges ahead as well.
So there are many areas which are constantly changing, it's evolving. So being a person in the profession, I think it's exciting that you get to participate in all these changes, and perhaps when you participate in all these developments, you might be able to help shape some of these developments as well. Or it's either to shape the policy changes, or perhaps if it's someone in the private sector, it's also to shape how people think and view and do the businesses, for instance. So that's probably what's going to happen going forward.
But there will be many challenges. How do budding tax professionals deal with these?
In whichever profession that you're in, there will always be challenges. It's a matter of the frequency, the extent, and the magnitude. It's about keeping an open mind and, of course, getting yourself updated constantly, and then it's being able to think perhaps out of the box sometimes to help you overcome these challenges. And I think the mindset should be to, people say change is the only constant. So it is to have the mindset to accept that it is probably part and parcel of everyday life. And moreover, if there are no challenges, I guess then tax will become boring if that's the case.
If you're a mentor to someone looking to consider tax as a career, what would your advice or your mentorship be centered around?
For someone who is considering tax as a career, I would say that the person would have to go in with a long-term mindset, because tax, like many other professions, is not something where you might see results, or you might find something that you really like about tax within the first few years, but it is to be patient and to really go through pretty well-trodden path in the initial years, and after that is then to see which are the areas that really interest you, and then if you want to go in-depth into certain areas, there's actually a lot of scope. And because tax is constantly evolving as well, so apart from the fact that you can go deep, perhaps there's also a chance for you to shape and to change the way things are as well.
So give us some example, an illustration in a particular tax base, one particular stream perhaps. How would a person prepare himself or herself to join tax from there?
Perhaps, well, for myself, I deal a lot with the international tax space, but of course, international tax, to be able to do international tax, for starters, you need to know your domestic tax well, because you need to know what really happens and how the laws are applied here domestically before you can even talk about cross-border transactions and how in the international tax space things are being done. So for a person to prepare for such a specialization, like starters, domestic tax, know it well, and then of course it's really to know what's happening in the whole wide world out there, what are the kind of transactions, the business models, what are the international rules, because when you talk about cross-border transactions, for instance, it is about the interaction of many different countries' rules. So then how then do you figure out what's the best way forward and how are all these overlaps resolved from an international perspective, or what is the best way forward. So, and it's also to know what's really happening outside of your domestic jurisdiction as well, because when you talk about international transactions, it is perhaps something that you might not see very often within your own country, but it's coming in, perhaps what's happening outside, and there are interactions with what's happening over here. So I think that would be how a person would have to prepare for a career in international tax.
So you started with IRAS, you started and you've built a career on that, basically with one employer. But to someone who is looking at you and say, do I stay with one employer throughout my tax career, or do I look at changes along the way in order to advance? What would you advise?
I've been in IRAS for many, many years, but I've, well, for lack of better words, not been bored, because I have been pretty fortunate. I've been moved around. So with every posting, I get to see different things, I do different things, and I learn new things as well. So for me thus far, even though it's one employer, but I don't feel like I've been stuck in the same area all this while.
If you have one bit of advice to a budding tax professional, what will that be?
Really is to be open-minded, and then really is to know what you want and to really open your mind to everything. When you talk about tax, it's not really just about like the income tax law or whatever models that we're talking about. It's really more about knowing how to apply all these set of principles to whatever that's happening outside. So, and is to be interested in what's happening outside as well.